told your friend you're not okay? And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. And guess you're trying to stay strong and fake.
Hi guys, this is my life story. My name is Francisca Ndinda, and on today's episode we are going to focus on Esther Wamai, who is a principal at Kenya Community Center for Learning and also a CEO at Bloom Dissexia. So please join me and usibanduke. To interview with us, so you can just introduce yourself and tell us what you do as a career.
All right. Thank you very much, Siska, for having me here. My name is Esther Wamai Mushiri. I am a special needs educator. I offer support to children who struggle with learning as a result of different neurodevelopmental disabilities like dyslexia, autism, Down syndrome, and others with conditions like cerebral palsy. And we run a school called Kenya Community Center for Learning, where I am the principal, and it's basically a primary and a secondary school for children who struggle with learning and attention issues.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing this kind of work, like helping in disability?
Okay, very good. My journey in the special education started way back in 2005. So you're actually talking of 17 years in the career.
That's a lot.
Yes, yeah.
So what really drove you to specialize in this career? Because I can imagine it's not easy.
Yes. Well, I think I have a very interesting story because I didn't train as a special needs teacher. I just did a general B.Ed degree course, English literature, and after my training, I joined the regular schools, or what we call the mainstream schools. So I've taught in some of the biggest girls' schools in Nairobi. But back then, in 2001, when I graduated from campus, the TSC had stopped recruitment, mass recruitment, and the few vacancies that were available, first priority was being given to those graduates who had graduated like 5 years before us. So every time we'd go for the interview, we would pass in all other areas, but the fact that there were others who had graduated before us and were still not employed, they would get the first priority. So in the process, I ended up teaching in private schools, but my last posting in a mainstream school was Pangani Girls, where I taught English literature. I was employed by we used to call it BOM then, BOG, Board of Governors. These days they call it BOM, Board of Management. But it was just a very short stint. Then I left Pangani Girls, and that's where now my journey in special education started, because a certain school called Agastana Academy was recruiting a teacher of English. And when I learned about the position, I applied without even knowing that it was a special school. So I went through the motion of recruitment, from the interview to from application, shortlisting, and interview. And it's actually during the interview that I learned that it was a special school. As much as we're looking for a teacher of English, they also needed somebody who can support children with learning struggles. So as much as I didn't have a special education background, I was very confident that given an opportunity, I would be able to support those children. And I think that's the confidence they must have seen, because I got myself the job. Of course, not having special education background, but of course, I already had the minimum requirement, because they needed somebody who can teach English. So I already had that. So, of course, we went through very rigorous training, on-job training, on special education, and mostly handling children with dyslexia, because the school was specializing more with students with dyslexia, though we had other students with the other conditions, autism. But the common denominator is that they were all struggling with literacy. And of course, with my background in languages, and with the training now on how to teach children who learn differently, it came in handy. So I joined the school as a teacher of English, and within 2 terms, I was promoted to the administration. I became the deputy principal, and within 1 year, we lost our principal, and so I was appointed in an acting capacity, where I think I acted for a year before I was confirmed as a principal. And since then, I've not looked back, and 17 years down the line and counting, that is what I have done. Of course, I later went back to school, now just to formalize my training, and with my languages background and dyslexia being a language-based disorder that affects how children learn the language acquisition skills, language skills acquisition, the reading skills, the spelling skills, the writing skills. So I got very interested in that area, and so I went back to school. I trained with an institution in the US, and now got to learn in depth about dyslexia and how to support and to intervene on children who have dyslexia and other learning disabilities.
That's really amazing. So I wanted to ask, how does one deal with children? Okay, let me say people with disabilities, because I know it's very difficult. But for you to come, you have never been into that industry. So and then coming, teaching, and then even getting a principal position. So how was the journey?
Well, the journey has been very, very exciting.
Yeah.
It has, I wouldn't say it has been challenging in a negative connotation. I would say for me, the challenge has been a positive challenge, where, of course, you're dealing with these children and you really want the best in them, and you have to be very, very innovative in seeing how you're going to support the children. So it's been an exciting journey. It's been a learning journey, because you have to keep learning. This field keeps changing all the time. It keeps evolving. And remember, because we are dealing with brain-based issues, so new research keep on coming. So you've got to keep abreast with the latest research. What is research saying about brain science? Because we are intervening on brain-based issues. So what are the new methodologies, teaching methodologies that have come up? What are the new approaches that teachers in this field are using? What's the new technology? Because these are children who, part of the support that they require is not just now the human support, the teacher. Technology also comes in very handy to support them. We call it assistive technology. And technology, again, is evolving every day. So what's the latest technology to support reading? What's the latest technology to support spelling? So you've got to keep abreast. So it's very, very exciting that you're not in a field that is static, that it's a textbook that was published 10 years ago that you're still using. So it's very different for us, that you've got to keep abreast with what is happening if you are to really support your children. And again, COVID came, and again, here you are with children with disabilities. Schools have closed. So are you going to keep them at home for a whole year? No. So you've got to be innovative. So we also deployed online teaching, and thanks to our partnership with Microsoft. And Microsoft has a very powerful learning platform. So that again was also another challenging moment for us, because how do we drive engagement for our students while they are still at home, and also to allow them to maintain that social connectedness, because most of them, their friends are in school. They have very limited maybe friends out there. So how do we make sure that we have brought them together? So I must say that it's been an exciting journey, and one journey that of course has come with its own rewards.
Yeah. So another question
Yeah.
on top of that, because the curriculum you're talking about.
Yeah.
So just to tell people, is it a Kenyan based like for 844 or it's for other countries?
Okay, very good. So we offer an alternative curriculum to the Kenyan system, because what happens, Siska, is that almost 99% of our children come from our local schools, learning the local, our national curriculum, the 844 and now the CBC. But apparently there have been gaps in our education system that don't really provide for children. Our system, our Kenyan system does not have provisions for children who learn differently, for children with learning disabilities. So you find that because of the systematic barriers that our education system pose to children with special needs, most of them struggle with the system. And therefore, as a school, Kenya Community Center for Learning, we had to look for an alternative education curriculum that will support and meet the needs of these learners. And therefore, for us, the Kenyan system was not an option for us. After all, most of the students had already gone through the system, and I keep saying the system had failed them. They are not failed the system, and therefore we have to come up with an alternative of another system that would, or curriculum that will support them. And that's what informed us to go into the British curriculum, because you're able to adapt the curriculum. It is more friendly for students who struggle, and also incorporate another curriculum still from the UK that is competence-based, activity-based, very close to the CBC, and they have served us very, very well. Yes.
But I remember you were saying like there's a lot of young people from this institute, like they are still learning, they're still learning media in other institutes. That's really nice.
Yes,
That's
because
really
what
nice.
happens, but I think now there's hope with CBC, because previously with the 844 system, that was highly academic, exam oriented. That is where now our students with special needs really struggled. And now the British curriculum has opportunities for these children to develop, and for the schools to nurture their talents, and at an early age they're exposed to those skills early that help us identify where their areas of interest, strengths and passion are. And that's how even for us, like our graduates, have been able to transition to even colleges and universities. Unlike in the 844 system, where the transition from primary to secondary to college to university for students who have gone through the Kenyan system is quite a challenge. But with the British system, because of the friendly approach to learning and exposure to extracurricular that provide opportunities for children to develop talents, they are able now to also progress up to the tertiary level of education and even employment.
That's really wonderful. So with the experience that you have, so what can you tell us about the condition, people living with disabilities in Kenya and Africa at large?
Well, I must say that we are trying, because I don't think the situation is the same as it was when I was joining this field. I think a lot is being done in terms of legislation, in terms of policies, in terms of awareness, and in terms of inclusion, because I think you can see even like in government, we have the affirmative action that a certain percentage of persons with disabilities have to be given employment opportunities. They have to be given opportunities for tenders. The buildings now are a bit more accessible, not like back in the days. we are still struggling, of course, in many areas. I would say we are trying, but we are still playing catch up. We've got a long way to go, but I must say that I think the space and the environment is much more friendlier than it was back in the days. However, I must also say that even with all the policies, even with all the legal frameworks that we have, including even international instruments that we have ratified, like the CPRD and all those other international laws that Kenya is a member to, we still have persons with disability suffering, and especially because poverty and disability are almost twins, Siamese twins, joined together. And until we get to a level where we'll empower persons with disabilities economically, and I keep saying we talk about economic empowerment for persons with disabilities, but we ignore the fact that for these people to be meaningfully and gainfully empowered, we have to work on their education. And that is what I have just said, that our Kenyan system is not very accommodative for persons with disabilities, and especially the neurodevelopmental disabilities. I think for the traditional disabilities, the government has really invested in education institutions for the deaf, the blind, the physically handicapped, but you find for those with neurodevelopmental disabilities, the intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, very little focus and attention have been given to those people. And even with those still with the traditional disabilities, I must say that we have not reached to a point where we can say that there has been equity and access to education, because education is the key to unlocking any potential that any human being have. So long as we are still lagging behind in terms of empowering persons with disabilities with the right skills, with the right knowledge, right attitudes, we will still not achieve the SDGs. We are talking of the SDGs on eradication of poverty. We are talking about access to quality education. We are talking about I've talked about minimizing or reducing inequalities among persons with disabilities. And I think the narrative is the same, not just here in Kenya, across Africa, because even as we interact with our peers in the field, you hear that the narrative is the same. So as much as we can say that maybe over the past 10 years, some milestones have been achieved, I still feel that there's still more that needs to be done so that we can confidently and proudly say that we are taking care of our persons with disabilities the way we should.
Nice. So another question is, have you ever, or is any student from the informal settlement here, like maybe Mathare, Korogosho, Kibera?
Yes. So as a school, we have a policy where at least at any one given time, we have a student who is on full scholarship. And the criteria for such a student is that the child has to be from a very deserving background. And of course, we have a way of verifying that. And therefore, for the students that we have offered scholarship, even like the current student who will be graduating in 3 or 4 months' time, is actually from Korogocho. So yes, so from the informal sector, that is where we support the children, because we feel that is where we have students who are most deserving. And like the one who finished before the one we have currently is a young man, and this man came from I think Mailisaba. Yes, Mailisaba. And one of the things that really touched me with this young man is the father came to see me in the office. He was referred to our school, and he came. He didn't know anybody. And when he walked to my office, so he told me about his son who had completed his primary school education, and he had done his KCP, scored I think 100 marks, and he was really struggling finding a secondary school placement, of course because of the low performance. And therefore, when I met this man, that was second term. So this boy was still at home. All his peers had already joined Form 1. I think in February, that's when they joined Form 1. So for 6 months, the boy was at home, very depressed, and because he knows his potential, he knows he can, but it was proving to be very hard for him to get placement. So when the father was referred to us, he came, and what really touched me is that this old man came with an art book of his son, and he showed me the drawings, the artwork of his son, because the boy is highly talented in artwork. And when I looked at those drawings, I asked him, so has he traced them, or this is freehand drawing? He told me it's freehand drawing. So the boy had done cartoons, he had pictures of animals, he had very, very beautiful pictures. And I looked at that talent and I said, we cannot afford to let this talent go to waste. And so I encouraged him, and I told him we will see what we can do. And I actually told that man that we'll not only take your son, I know by the time your son is living here, he will actually even have traveled out of the country. So I spoke to the board and we gave the boy an opportunity. So he came and now advanced his art skills, because we have art and design as a subject. We supported him and he was able to sit his exams. And as we speak today, he's actually working at Wamai Africa restaurant as a coffee barista.
That's really wonderful.
He's still pursuing his love for art, but now he has ventured into photography. So he's also a part-time photographer for Special Olympics Kenya. And my prophecy to the father that the boy will have even gone to another country has come true, because in 2018 he traveled to Azerbaijan. I keep confusing that name, but it's a small country somewhere in Europe, for Youth Leadership Forum. It was an Africa Youth Leadership Forum. So actually he went to represent Africa, and it was an amazing time. And from there he got a grant to come and implement a unified project of students with disabilities and those without disabilities through sports. And again, the following year he traveled to Japan for a cultural event, again courtesy of Special Olympics Kenya. And it's one of the success stories that, yes, that really confirms that education is an enabler, and persons with disabilities, given the right education, given the right supports, given the right opportunities, there is no limit to what they can achieve.
Exactly. So apart from that only guy,
yes,
is there any person that has already, like you have a success story of another person?
Oh, we have many success stories, Siska. Okay. If we start here, we will be here until dawn. Yeah. We have very many success stories. We have students, and maybe one thing I need to say is that these students, even when they come here, it's not that we eliminate or eradicate the learning disability. Brain-based issues are long life issues. Neurodevelopmental conditions are long life. So what happens is that when they come and we do the assessment, we do diagnosis, and we start the interventions, we empower them. So even with the disability, the learning disability, what is it? What else can they do that is good? And God has a way of compensating them, because the same brain that struggles with reading, writing, and spelling is the same one that does things that are just amazing, wonders that you and me, the typical people, may not be able to do. So they are highly gifted in the areas that use the right side of the brain, because that's their dominant side of the brain. So you find areas of art, design, creativity, innovation, invention, sports, music. They are very, very good at that. And so those are the areas that we really focus on in our learning here. And that is what has given these students a lifeline. So you realize when they graduate here and they join college or universities, they are doing courses that are aligned to their interests and their strengths. So we have quite a number in film and production, photography, videography. We have chefs.
Wow. Wow.
in 4-star hotels, 5-star hotels, doing.
I need to test their food.
You will, even the ones we already have
Yeah.
here who are training, they are really doing very well.
Yeah.
And we have, last year we had a young man who graduated from USIU with international business management. This is actually he's a young man with the cerebral palsy, yes, on wheelchair. But again, through our advocacy, we went to the university and we were able to explain to them how he learns best and the kind of supports he needs. And they took him, and 4 years down the line, he's graduated. And he's already a CEO of a tech company called TechFi. So they're into web designs, online marketing. So we have many success stories. We have even a pilot. One of our alumni students is a pilot. So if he needs to go to Mombasa, the family needs to go to Mombasa, he flies the family. Yes.
That's really a nice success story.
Thank you.
So you've talked about funds. So I wanted to ask, how do you describe the affiliation between people living with disability and the government in terms of fund and help?
All right.
In leadership, sorry.
Okay, very good. So I think when it comes to support by government, and especially financial support, we must acknowledge that the government has made some effort, because you've heard of the cash transfer, yes, for persons with disabilities. And I think it's a small stipend of 2,000, I think, per month. And as much as it may look little, I know in the rural setup, that is not little money. And I know it has really supported those families. Of course, the only challenge is that the consistency at which the money is disbursed. So sometimes you'll hear there are delays. So if only maybe government would be consistent so that these families have a reliable source of income. Of course, if you look at it maybe now more practically and realistically, against the background of the economic times that we are in and inflation, again, I feel it's maybe a little bit little, and especially now for those in urban setup. Maybe in the village, it may be a different story, but in the urban setup, I think if that amount eventually would be increased, it will go a long way in supporting the family. So we have the cash transfers, then we have the affirmative action, where again, like in the public tendering, procurement, persons with disabilities have also been, they have set aside a certain proportion of tendering or procurement for supplies for persons with disabilities. So I think that's also another area. And even in the funding, the youth fund, the women fund for persons with disabilities, although you keep hearing even in the news persons with disabilities, decrying that the requirements and the requirements that are needed to access those funds are very stringent for persons with disabilities, and it makes it very hard to access that funding. So again, if that process can be made much easier and easily accessible for persons with disabilities, it will go a long way. So I think even public appointments for employment, we've seen a PS, a lady with disabilities. We have seen even in Parliament, representation through nominations of persons with disabilities. So I think we've made some strides, and there's still more that can be done. When it comes to even other areas of support, we have the National Council for Persons with Disabilities that does the registration for persons with disabilities, and also they have bursaries for learners with disabilities. They have, I think even at the tertiary level, they have a way of supporting those that are in the TVET and the NITA trainings. I think startup capital or even equipment after they've finished training to help them set up small businesses. So at least the National Council of Persons with Disability has been at the forefront of championing for the rights of persons with disabilities, access to funding and support. And I know we also have another body called the National Fund for Persons with Disabilities, and that now is an even bigger fund where institutions are funded for infrastructure, of course disability friendly infrastructure. It could be maybe even transport, buses. So I must say that, and of course we even have laws, as I had talked about, the legal framework that are also put in place to ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are safeguarded. So I think let's give credit where it's due. Yeah, the government has done something.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, because for me, like, to get a fund, it's really hard. So when someone has a disability, do they come to an organization, to an institute, or can a parent like ask for the funds? So how does one acquire funds when he's or she's a disabled person?
Okay, very good. So I think it depends on where, and it also depends on the type and nature of disabilities, because like the traditional disabilities, these are people who are intellectually capable to be able to maybe ask for the funding on their behalf. But for children or persons with intellectual disabilities, a parent has to be involved. So like, and I've not even mentioned at the county level, even at the county level, the sub-county level, we also have bursaries. So like the MPs disburse bursaries, and I know they also giving bursaries for, even at the MCA level, they are also giving bursaries to children with disabilities. So in that case, of course, I believe it's a parent who walk into an MCA's office or a member of parliament's office and request for bursary on behalf of their children. However, Siska, it's important for our parents to understand that you will not access those funds if your child is not registered with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. That's where it all begins. Even for those tenders we are talking about by government, even for the public appointments by government, any support that the government is giving, it has to, the person has to be registered with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. And most parents don't know that. Most part, we actually have the National Council for Persons with Disabilities that does the registration, and once the registration is done, the child or the person is issued with a card, like an ID card, and it even shows the nature of disability. Then that is the card that you use to ask or to solicit for any help or support from government. So in most cases, I think, as I've said, it will depend on the nature and the age of the person with disability, because I know there are many who are able to ask on their own behalf, but in most cases for children or persons with neurodevelopmental disabilities, the caregiver or the parent does it on their behalf. Yeah.
So what challenges do you face, and also the challenges like being here and also like working with the disabled people?
All right. Well, I think as an institution, I would say the challenge that we have faced as KCCL is the fact that we do not have our own property. So for instance, these grounds that we are in, this is a rented premises, and this is our fourth location since the inception of the school, because the school started in Kileleshwa. Then I think 3 or 4 years down the line, the owner needed to put a different development, so we were given notice of eviction. We moved to Kileleshwa again, a different location. Again, that didn't work for us, and I think 6 months down the line, eviction notice. Then we ended up in Lavington, and again in Lavington the rent became too high, and the school could not sustain that kind of rent, so we had to look for a cheaper alternative. And the only cheaper alternative for us was now this place. So you can imagine moving the school from Lavington to here. And back in the days, that's when the Thika Superhighway was being constructed. So the parents from that end could not imagine bringing their children this side. It was such a hassle. So we lost quite a number of students from that side. And you can imagine when we moved into these premises, we only came with 13 children. And so it was a big struggle. It's a rented premises. We have rent to pay. We have salaries to pay. We have children to feed. We have vehicles to fuel. So, but we thank God, because again, this side, we didn't have a school like this. I think we had only one school. So it was a blessing in disguise for families around this area. So with time, we started building the numbers. So we've been in this property for the last 11 years. But again, we have been served with eviction notice once again, and so we are not sure what our next location is going to be. But if you now listen to our story, you would imagine that at least, because we are supplementing the efforts of government, because yes, the government has special schools, it has special units, but all children cannot fit there. So if we had support from government, because government has land, and just maybe give private schools that are serving these children incentives by just even giving us land, we are going to construct for ourselves. So that has been our biggest challenge, that we are always at the mercies of our landlords. And the moment they change their mind and they need to do something different, we have to keep packing. So I would say, I think amongst many other challenges that has, and this is not anything unique to us, Siska. Many schools, as I've said, I've been in this profession for 17 years, and I have watched schools like these ones, private schools like these ones, start and close. 1 year, 3 years down the line, they have closed, because they are all on rented premises, and become sometimes it's not, we don't make money from this kind of work, Siska, and therefore sometimes it becomes very hard to sustain the school from the fees without any external support. And in most cases, we have no support. We are on our own, and parents are on their own. It's actually parents who have to bear the brunt and the burden of giving their children this kind of education. Yeah.
I know everything will be okay.
Oh yes, we trust God. Yeah.
So just to wind up all the session, so some conditions are being neglected. You all know that, and this is my include delay or disabilities in reading and writing may be treated. Sorry. So let me just rephrase it. Some conditions are being neglected, and this may include delay or difficulties in reading and writing. So may this be treated as disabled?
Yes, they may be treated as disabled, because basically what they are, if they are assessed and diagnosed as learning disabilities, they fall under the category of disabilities, because disabilities, we have different categories of disabilities, and depending on the cause or how they manifest. So if a child is struggling in reading and writing, not because of other factors, because there are other factors that make children or learners unable to read and write. For instance, of course, lack of education opportunities, or even poor education opportunities, that probably the instructions are poor and the students are not accessing quality education, appropriate instruction, that can result into learning issues. And then, of course, we have other factors, maybe medical issues, health issues, that would predispose a child to struggling in learning. But if the challenges are a result in reading and writing as a result of a diagnosed or identified learning disability, learning disabilities already qualify to be disabilities. Yes, even in our country. Like recently, the president launched the national framework for special needs education, and they have now expanded the range of categories of disabilities. Initially, we had a very narrow categories of disabilities, the traditional disabilities as it were, but now they have appreciated that even learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, also are disabilities to be considered as so and to be given the attention and the support they need. And you're right, they have been ignored. And why have they been ignored? They've been ignored because they are what we call invisible disabilities, hidden disabilities. So unlike the physical disabilities that are obvious, we can see them and we will empathize and sympathize. Reading, writing, and mostly that's the condition I was calling the dyslexia. These people look like you and me.
Yes.
There's no physical manifestation that would betray that they have a learning disability. And that is now the scenario in our schools, that once these children are enrolled in schools, because there's no physical manifestation, they will be enrolled just like any other child. They will be in class with their peers, but now with time, they start falling behind. But the teachers, of course, make efforts and they try different things that they think would help. But if it's not the right intervention, if it's not evidence or research-based intervention, it's bound to fail. And so what happens is that these children now start falling through the cracks. And by the time maybe they are getting to class 3, class 4, class 5, it's been a wait and see approach by the teachers, but I call it a wait and fail approach. So when they start now failing, and consistently so, that is when now people start raising the alarm that all is not well. But the red flags have been there all through, but not being addressed. So the fact that they are not physical, that is why they are ignored. And again, the other reason why they are ignored is because they are conditions that are identified in schools, because they are school problems. All these other things at home may be okay. So they are school problems. But they are school problems, and we have teachers who are not aware about these conditions, who are not well equipped to identify these conditions and to support learners with these conditions. So what will they do? They will, of course, they can tell there's a problem, but they don't have a name to the problem. If you have no name to a problem, you have no treatment or management or intervention for it. And as a result, that's why I have said, even with our government, the focus has been on the traditional disabilities, because these are things that can, issues that can be seen. So they have intervened with schools, colleges, and all the support. But these others, because they have been hidden in people's sight, in plain sight, there has been no much attention and focus. But I'm happy because even a platform like this one, we are now raising awareness. We are now lobbying. We are advocating that these kids exist. Their issues may be hidden, but the fact of the matter is they are here with us and they need to be supported. Yeah.
That's really wonderful. Do you have any final remarks, like just to tell people, the parents who have kids with disabilities or the government?
Okay, very good. So I think my parting shot would be to the parents. And I would want to encourage parents that once you get a child and you realize that there's a deviation in their developmental milestones. What do I mean, Siska? What I mean is, if as a parent you realize there's a delay in your child walking, there's a delay in your child speaking, there's a delay in your child gaining some milestones that maybe other children have already achieved, and this may be siblings to this child, or even your children in the neighborhood, or people you got children at the same time, but these children have achieved milestones that your child has not achieved. That is already a red flag that it's a predictor that there might be bigger challenges ahead. And it helps to seek help early, because when you're dealing with brain-based issues, early identification leads to early interventions, and early interventions are key to everything, because when the brain is still young, when the child is still young, their brain is also young. So the brain responds more positively and more rapidly when the child is still young. So sometimes I know parents will wait hoping that things will change, things will improve. But that period, and especially the period of 0 to 6 years, it's a very critical period where if interventions are put in place, it may make a whole lot of difference to that child by ensuring that that child may lead almost a normal life because the right interventions were put in place. So I'm just urging parents not to, delay. And the moment a diagnosis is made and it is revealed that your child could be having a disability or a special need, I know it's not easy, but it helps to accept, because the moment you accept, you start now a more positive journey with your child, and you'll now be able to access help for your child. And it's also important that, again, parents, we support our children who are differently abled, because I know sometimes maybe because of the frustrations that come with raising a child with disabilities, maybe we tend to ignore them and invest on these other ones. But I can tell you that these children are able differently and they are talented differently. So if you give them the support, they may not be on the same pathway with the typical peers or the typical siblings. They will have they'll chart their own pathway, but it's also a pathway for success depending on the support they will receive.
Yeah, so true. And also even the neighbors.
Oh,
They
yes.
should also support.
Absolutely.
Even our community. We should all embrace parents who have children with disabilities, because also that's so important.
Very true.
Because how my neighbor will perceive me, it's how I'll treat my child.
Absolutely. Although I would also want to say the other way around. How you treat your child is how the neighbor and the community will treat your child. So it starts with you as a parent. Let's advocate for our children. Let's be their own their advocates, but also teach your child self-advocacy, because those self-advocacy skills are very important, because that's what they will use against that child who want to bully them, against that child who want to ridicule them, and it really goes a long way in boosting their self-esteem. But again, I totally agree. The society, the community, the neighbors, the church, we all have to be inclusive and accepting of persons with disabilities, because no parent ever signs to get a child with disability. So they find themselves there, and the best we can do is to support them, because it's not an easy journey and it can be a very lonely journey. But with the right support systems, the journey is much easier. And again, to the parents, it also helps to join a support group, because we have support groups out there, and actually even support group of the different disabilities or conditions, and there it's a community. So you find other parents who have been there before you. If their children are older than yours, there are lessons they have already learned, there are insights that they can give, and you get to learn a lot and just support each other and encourage each other. So as a parent of a child with special needs, please look out for those support groups, because they are there and it really helps. Then we also have many organizations out there who are out to support parents. I know already ADAS has come out guns blazing to support parents, therapies, information. So parents, don't be lonely. There's help out there. Information is power. So you just need, and in this era of technology, just Google organizations supporting children or parents of students with disabilities, and you'll actually be spoiled for choice, because the list is endless of support organizations out there.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Can you just say where people can find you, maybe on social media?
All right, very good. Yes, so on social media, you'll find us on Facebook, Kenya Community Center for Learning. We're also on Instagram at KCCL Kenya. Personally, you'll also find me on Facebook, Esther Wamai. I also privately run an organization called Bloom Dyslexia Center. We are on Facebook as Bloom Dyslexia Center, and next week our website will be live, so you'll also get to learn more information about dyslexia and any support that you as a parent or as a teacher you may want as far as dyslexia is concerned, and other specific learning disabilities.
As we just the final one. So can you tell me more about your organization?
All right.
Dyslexia.
Okay, very good. So, Bloom Dyslexia Center is a consultancy organization that aims to create awareness about dyslexia, but most importantly, not just about awareness, because I think already now awareness is there. But the question is, what next after I discover my child could be dyslexic? It's more about now the interventions, support systems. So we have different services that we offer, diagnostic, the assessments, screenings. We have trainings for teachers in mainstream schools, because these children are not just in special schools like this one. In fact, majority are in our mainstream schools, but teachers don't know how to support them. So we have trainings for teachers. We have trainings, parental support trainings for parents. We have specialized tutoring for children with dyslexia and even adults. We have workplace support, because we also have dyslexics in the workplaces. So we train managers and other team leaders to be able to give the right support to persons with dyslexia in the workplaces. And any other, we are very flexible, even customer.
Yes, you have heard it from herself, Esther Wamai. And don't forget to follow all our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Radiators Foundation. Yes.